All right. Well, it's Monday. Welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News. I'm your host, Greg Stoker, and we do this thing twice a week. And again, it's the week's first episode. Are you guys exhausted yet? We just saw some of the most horrific images of the past year over this weekend as a hospital in Middle Gaza was bombed, specifically tents outside of a hospital. And there were tents outside of the hospital with patients in it because the hospital itself had been bombed. So that's kind of what we're looking at starting the week. Also, there's a natural disaster in Florida. Just complete failure of United States leadership, both globally and domestically, in the wake of two hurricanes as well. We're going to tie this thing together into one completely broken system that we're now dealing with, that voting will definitely 100% voting this election will 100% fix everything. Okay. So first of all, Mint Press News, which is the platform for this show called The State of Play, as most of you will know, is a completely independent newsroom. We've been demonetized on everything, YouTube, X, no corporate sponsors. So your contributions on Patreon are always very helpful and appreciated. And if you can't swing it, I know $5 a month is really annoying, especially now that we're getting nickeled and dimed in this stage of late stage finance capitalism. We get it. We're just glad you're here. So if you can like, share, and subscribe, leave a comment maybe that helps boost us on the algorithm. We always greatly appreciate it. So first of all, we're going to start, before we bring on a guest, with some updates. First, you've heard that American troops are going to Israel. Yeah, they are. And we're going to hit on that well, you know what? Let's just talk about it right now. So that's one of the big news items. So if we got any THAAD B-roll, that would be awesome, Jim. Okay, so first of all, what is a THAAD? Because a THAAD is going over there. Let me pull up what I was sent. So you guys may be familiar with Generational News. He's a friend of the show, and we collaborate on a lot of things. He's a former field grade air defense artillery officer. So he had a couple THAADs in his battery. If you can't pull up the footage, just put like the Wikipedia page up or something. All right. So what is a THAAD? It's different from a Patriot missile. It's different from the David Sling or Iron Dome. It's different from a lot of things that you've heard about. And of course, the Israelis don't have it because it's strictly an American thing. Since the footage isn't working, we're just going to have to pull up this. Sorry, guys, the technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on with my video feed either. So what is the THAAD missile system? It can intercept missiles above Earth's atmosphere. It is the thermal well, basically, it shoots short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles. It complements the Patriot and Aegis systems. So those are kind of different high altitude, medium altitude, and short altitude, intermediate range ballistic missile defense. And okay, what is going on, Jim? Okay. Yep, there you go. Thermal high altitude area defense THAAD weapon system. And it again exists in many different levels. One battery is 96 soldiers, 6 launchers, 8 per launcher for 48 missiles, 200-kilometer middle range unclassified. So when we say something's unclassified, that means the range that it's giving is actually shorter than what it actually is capable of. So so it's 200 kilometers, so it can go intercept missiles out to that range. Radar can see for 3,000 kilometers. It has bigger coverage than the Patriot missile battery. So there are 7 U.S. Army batteries, 3 at Fort Bliss, 3 at Fort Cavazos, 1 in South Korea, and 1 in Guam. Those are for defense against North Korean missiles. It's all of nothing for air defense, which means like it doesn't really expand capabilities hugely. So maybe first proof of using our soldiers directly. That's why this is significant. Assuming that information, the information that the press has, is correct. It's a Lockheed Martin system and with Raytheon radar. So it takes up to 30 minutes to reload. It has 48 interceptions, and it doesn't have a warhead. So it uses kinetic energy. So it just slams the body into whatever missile it's intercepting. But the booster does separate before it hits the target. So you don't really want to be under that. And that's the basics of the info that you need for what Israel's getting. I'm not sure where the battery is coming from, but I guess Texas, because there's, a couple at Fort Bliss. Guam and South Korea are needed for South Korea deterrence. So since this is a new technology, it's like, how effective is it at intercepting hypersonic missiles? And hypersonic missiles are a new technology, and I doubt it's ever been tested because that takes months to test at least. You can only test in white sands or in the middle of the ocean. So like Johnson Atoll in Hawaii. These missiles can chase a hypersonic that changes trajectory, but that will, every time it changes trajectory, because hypersonic missiles can do that, it will decrease its success. So our first successful test of intercepting hypersonics, is with the THAAD, was just in August. So it's definitely not enough time to figure out how you can fight against them. So this is something you learn as you go. That's kind of what we did with the Scud-2 missiles in Iraq. Patriot missiles were designed to hit aircraft, not missiles, but they adapted the Patriot missile battery, which now is the air defense for all U.S. bases. And it originally was meant for aircraft, but now it's for missiles. So it can be adapted, but it has lots of uses. So I think it's being brought in more for Iran than Hezbollah because, again, Iran did put rounds on target on U.S. bases. So it's mostly used for the bigger missiles. The bigger and the higher, the less we have to protect. So, this does kind of seem just like a showy political move, unless you think it really bolsters capability. I think it does. But if Iran really opens up with its arsenal, remember, it only has 48 intercepts and it takes 30 minutes to reload. So it's kind of just like a speed bump, just like the THAAD batteries in Guam and South Korea are just a speed bump for the North Korean rocket arsenal. So what the big risk is, it's just a tripwire. If U.S. soldiers are killed, it could give, U.S. lawmakers and legislators impetus to, start a war with Iran or whatever fun stuff, So that's kind of what we're looking at with the THAAD battery. It's it costs $1 billion. Yeah, so that's fun. And yeah, that's it. They're not combat troops. They're air defense artillerymen. They'll just run intercepts, and hopefully that's the end of the story. But this is significant because it's actually high vis U.S. boots on the ground. Okay, as you said, apparently it engaged Yemeni missiles, the THAAD, in Israel and didn't do too well. Iran press news agency. Well, a lot of the Houthi ballistic missiles have been intercepted. And I think there is a THAAD battery in Israel. You'd have to fact check me about that. I think we sold them one, but this is a second one. Maybe. But then again, I'm always leery of state news organizations. So, next up, what are we talking about? We're talking about the storm. So, natural disasters and war crimes that happened this past weekend in Gaza. So, basically, as the 24-hour media cycle churns on. Oh, real quick, one more thing. So, Nader said Iran missed the opportunity of doing serious damage to military facilities, but has now a new opportunity to study the cutting-edge U.S. defense tech. Yeah, but that means they'd also have to use their hypersonic ballistic missiles, and they don't want to give that information away, too. I mean, I'm not saying your point's invalid, but I wouldn't say they missed the opportunity, but I think they wanted to not do a bunch of damage, but to like scare the IDF, let them know that their missile defense system doesn't really work that well, and also give them room to de-escalate by not doing a lot of damage and being able to say, "Oh, look how backwards Iran is. You know, it's a paper tiger of a military." How much do the interceptors cost, and how quickly can they be manufactured? I didn't prep that information, but they're not cheap. These are way bigger interceptors and way more complicated interceptors than Iron Dome. So they're frigging expensive. So yeah, as the 24-hour media cycle churns on, the humanitarian situation along the east coast of the United States, racked by 2 consecutive hurricanes, continues unabated, with tens of thousands of displaced and nearly 500,000 residents without power nearly 5 days after Hurricane Milton made landfall. So yet the media storm. So yet the media has moved on, myopically focused on the pre-election touring of presidential hopefuls Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and the recent Hezbollah attack on an IDF dining facility this past weekend, which killed 4 soldiers and wounded 60 others. Sky News actually ran the headline of the latter story as, quote, Israel names teenage soldiers killed in Hezbollah drone attack as, and 23 die in Gaza school strike. So they have since revised the headline to remove the word hostages, but teenage soldiers, to infantilize armed combatants in a war and blatantly disregard the identity and therefore the protected status of 23 children killed in an IAF kinetic strike on a school is emblematic of the legacy media coverage of this war. To protect Israel and shield Western audiences from its crimes, to neglect the suffering of the Palestinian people, and now to sweep aside the daily predicament of U.S. citizens living through a natural disaster. So the U.S. legislature authorized another $8.7 billion in military assistance to Israel on the eve of 2 large-scale hurricanes. And while domestic and foreign appropriations procedures exist on different planes and have different procedures, of course, many Americans are beginning to question the reasoning behind constantly sending out foreign aid while infrastructure is crumbling in the American homeland. So in the wake of Hurricane Helene, it's worth noting that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has, over the past few years, rejected $11 billion in federal funding, according to the Florida Policy Institute. Let me wait. There we go. And they said, quote, by continuing to opt out of federal funding for essential programs for Florida families like health coverage, disability services, mental health funding, climate resiliency programs, and more, the state could not only continually send billions of our tax dollars to other states, but also prevents improvements in quality of life for thousands of Floridians. So it's notable that Governor DeSantis did send weapons assistance to Israel last year, which is not illegal for an American state governor to do. So while we are accustomed to the media ignoring the plight of Palestinians in Gaza. We have not seen such a lack of reporting on hardship on the American front, especially in such a conservative area as Florida. So, like, will the residents connect a full-throated support of Israel in Congress, which has now authorized the deployment of $1 billion THAAD battery to safeguard its airspace, to their own governmental neglect? So Ron DeSantis perpetually calls for funding the war against Gaza, hosts state cabinet meetings in Israel to encourage investment, and now refuses public funds for infrastructure and disaster relief. So we find it unlikely that this mismanaged disaster will be the wake-up call for many Americans, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. So tonight on State of Play, we are joined in discussion by Hassan Shibly, the founder and lead attorney of Muslim Legal out of Florida, and a civil rights activist. So we'll get to that here in a second. But yeah, it's just kind of odd that a state governor, the governor of a state, not a federal official, can send weapons to other countries. So I think Greg Abbott of Texas did the same thing. So individual states can send money and weapons to Israel as well. It requires some sort of federal authorization, but it's kind of wild that a state governor can still do that. So, yeah, don't even get me started on the horrifying distribution of taxpayer funds. Yeah, no funding for anything, just war. Oh yeah, this is another great point before we get into the interview. They called Hind Rajab a woman. A young woman killed. A young woman, not a little girl. Of course, would you expect them to do anything otherwise? They just they're calling the Hezbollah drone strike on an IDF military base that killed 4 teenage soldiers a terrorist attack. How? Like, they're uniformed combatants in what they're calling a war. Yeah, it's just kind of insane, the mobilization of language. And they're doubling down, and they're not going to change. And did you guys see the another thing of note? Trump says he will deploy the U.S. military against radical leftists. So I guess I'm going to be like first on the list then. So it's something else to look forward to if he gets elected. But still, not sure if that's enough to make me vote for the current administration conducting a genocide and burning Palestinians alive in their medical tents. So without further ado, y'all, let's just, have a rant. This seems like as good a time as any to just have a frigging rant. All right, y'all, tonight on State of Play, we are going to be talking about humanitarian crises, some manufactured, some through carelessness, but all responsibility lies with the U.S. government. And tonight we are joined by Hassan Shibly, who is the founder and lead attorney of Muslim Legal out of Florida, with over a decade of service committed to protecting civil rights and challenging government overreach and tyranny. He established one of the largest civil rights organizations in Florida and raises considerable amounts of funds for philanthropic causes. You're currently coming to us from Tampa, Florida, which just got hit. Thank you so much for finding power and internet and jumping on.
Great to be here. I used one of my last gallons to get the generator running, so we got the Wi-Fi right now.
Okay, awesome. So one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to do this episode is because it's, well, first of all, we have to acknowledge we have seen, and I assume you've had enough power on your phone to realize that we've seen some of the most horrific images come out of Gaza this past, like literally last night. Yesterday, they hit a hospital, which was not even in the North Gaza, with their expanded military operation, which is just no hold bars, not even trying to hide it anymore, ethnic cleansing to get everybody out of the North and establish a military zone. But no, the hospital that they hit, in Deir Bala, is in like middle Gaza. It's in the humanitarian zone, and they dropped ordnance on it. There are propane tanks, so there were secondary explosions. A lot of the Hezbollah were saying, see, those are Hamas bombs and IEDs along the camps. It's like, no, they're propane tanks. Tents have them for cooking. Same thing in Lebanon when they say there's, ordnance in civilian homes. No, they're propane tanks, which people use throughout the entire region.
Mm.
And we witnessed a man burning to death, unable to move, with an IV still in his arm. So that happened. And now I did what I just had to acknowledge that. And now the United States is sending a THAAD battery. We're actually putting U.S. boots on the ground in an official capacity now. Things are ramping up. And on the home front, a lack of infrastructure, decaying infrastructure, basically massive incompetence, it seems, because even after 5 days of Hurricane Milton coming through, there's still 500,000 people without power. And I kind of wanted to bring you on to talk about this because I saw like one of your social media posts. I'm just going to play it right now. It's only 90 seconds. Where is it? All right. Yeah.
It's really time for the American people to be outraged. My fellow Americans, what we're witnessing right now is just absolutely insane. I'm here in Tampa, Florida. We still don't have power at home. Hundreds of thousands of us are without power. We cannot get fuel to run our generators. There's gas stations are not open. Even those that are open have hours and hours of lines. Floridians and Americans here at home after this natural disaster are struggling, absolutely struggling, and the government can't provide the infrastructure with our tax dollars to give us the resources that we've paid for. Meanwhile, however, Israel does not run out of fuel to rain bombs down against children. Our government cannot provide for us here at home after a natural disaster, but they can send billions of dollars overseas for a foreign state to engage in violence against civilian populations. Now, that really should outrage us. I mean, if the pictures of dead Palestinian children every day doesn't wake you up and outrage you, at the very least, let the fact that your politicians don't care about us, that the politicians are sending our money abroad and can't even make sure that we have fuel after a natural disaster, run our generators. That should outrage us. The fact that our politicians don't care about us, they've sold their soul to Israel. They are putting Israel's interest above our own. We are struggling here in the United States. We don't have the right infrastructure here in the United States. We're not getting our tax dollars worth here at home. After a natural disaster, we're left to fend for ourselves. But meanwhile, we can send billions of dollars for Israel. Terrible and outrageous.
You know, I kind of feel like there's no affordable housing, no affordable health care. You know, college is inaccessible. It just seems like Congress at this point is just an arms dealer.
Literally. And, you know, it's very demoralizing for me, Greg, that I even have to mention about what we are going through as Floridians and as Americans to try to wake people up about how wrong our government is and our elected officials are and our politicians are in their approach to what's happening in Palestine and the genocide and the horrific crimes against humanity we're witnessing Israel is doing. So, like, for me, it's mind-boggling. I mean, every single day on my phone, I'm witnessing beautiful, innocent children, you know, crying in extreme pain if they're even alive, with limbs missing, fathers in tears as they're holding body parts of their children. And this isn't a one-off. It's a daily thing we've been seeing for a whole year. And I'm a father. You know, I have my youngest is 3 years old. I love my daughter to death. I would literally take a bullet for her. And I know that the Palestinian fathers, their love for their children is no less than the love I have for my own. And yet every single day I'm witnessing fathers like me burying their children. And for me, as a human being, I would think that if America and our country and our elected officials are moral, grounded people, that would be enough to say, what the hell? There's no way we're going to take part of this. There's no way we're going to support this. And there's no way we're going to enable it. And we're going to ensure that it stops. We're at least going to stop providing the weapons, providing the political cover, providing the funding. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, the images of dead children, literally beheaded babies. There were no beheaded babies on October 7th, but there have been daily beheaded babies, Palestinian babies beheaded by American bombs dropped by Israel almost every single day since October 7th. So unfortunately, I think it's exposed. It's been a mirror that's showed us who we really are, not necessarily as Americans, but who our elected officials are, and the fact that they've sold their soul to the military industrial complex, to the Israeli lobby, and they're putting Israel's interests above our own. And frankly, they're not even benefiting Israel's interests, right? I mean, they're definitely not benefiting America's interests. So,
that's a great point. If they were actually concerned about Israel's long-term survival, they would have ended this.
Exactly.
And its viability as a state.
Exactly. So the point I'm trying to get at is that as a human, I would wish the elected officials we put in power, the state system that we are all a part of, would be benevolent enough, or just basically human decent enough to say, hey, we have a year straight of innocent civilians being blown up with our weapons. Let's put an end to it. But clearly that hasn't been enough. So now what I do hope is the messaging that you've just seen and what we're discussing right now. What I hope is that Americans wake up to the fact that we are struggling at home. We are struggling here at home in the United States. We don't have what we need in the United States, but Israel continues to take billions of our tax dollars to engage in war crimes, while we as Americans are not being put first by our own government. And that's my problem right now. Frankly, it's still dangerous to go outside in Tampa right now. I mean, you're driving around, it's 5 days, there's still trees blocking roads, there's still roads that are flooded, there's still power lines that are down. We don't have power. I literally use one of the last gallons of fuel that I have right now to run the generator to do this interview. We can't even find fuel. I mean, we can't. There's gas stations are barely open. The gas stations that are open don't have fuel. Those that do have fuel, you're talking about sometimes 4 or 5 hour waits to get fuel. And this is very problematic, because imagine people sometimes are on their last gallon. They may not even have enough fuel to wait in the line to get to get gas. And you need gas not just for your car, you need gas to run your generator. There's people who have medical devices at home, they have medicine in the fridge, they need some sort of fuel to keep things going for a basic level of human survival. We can't get fuel here, we can't get the support we need here, but Israel doesn't run out of fuel to rain bombs down on children. I mean, literally yesterday I'm watching children and a man, like you mentioned, with the IV, needles and lines, because they're in a hospital getting treated, in a makeshift hospital in tents, and yet they're roasted alive, burning alive. Israel has the resources to do that, but our government can't give us resources to make sure we're taken care of after this natural disaster. It should blow our minds. Why are our politicians sending billions overseas that's causing mayhem, instead of using those billions at home to make America the best place to live? That's what's mind-boggling. We're sending billions to cause destruction instead of keeping those billions at home to give Americans the best possible life.
So this is interesting, because Florida is traditionally a red state. It tends to vote Republican, and there's an idea of like non-interventionalism. Critics of conservative foreign policy would call them like isolationists. Basically this idea to keep money at home. A lot of people who follow Trump now are saying, let's end the war in Ukraine. Let's stop sending like 300 billion. That number's incorrect. Sorry, like billion after billion after $1 billion to the war in Ukraine. Now I hear some of them saying, hey, should we stop funding Israel? But is anyone like in any of the more conservative people that you know, which is the main voter base in Florida, making these connections at all? Because I know some people try to complicate the issue by saying like, hey, when it comes to like government appropriations, there's a difference between like domestic allocations and foreign aid stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But you can notice the difference between, what they fight over in terms of Democrats and Republicans, and what they both sign up for. So like when it comes to foreign policy, Democrats and Republicans tend to vote the same, and they have been pretty much voting the same for the funding Israel. There's been a lot more contention over funding Ukraine than there has been about funding Israel. Now, I know Ron DeSantis votes yay for every package to Israel, but didn't he just recently deny $11 billion for storm and natural disaster infrastructure in Florida. And so Ron DeSantis, everybody, if you're not American, he's the governor, the lead official responsible for the governance of the state of Florida. He turned away $11 billion for storm-related infrastructure. Am I correct?
That's insane. Absolutely. And that's what's mind-boggling is you have Governor Ron DeSantis. In fact, after he got elected, I think his first cabinet meeting, he held it in Israel. He held it in Israel, flew on our taxpayer money, on our taxpayer dime. He flew the cabinet to Israel to have his first cabinet meeting. These politicians, frankly, are cucks for Israel. I'm sorry to say. I mean, they are just bending over backwards to appease Israel, to make themselves look as pro-Israel at the expense of the American taxpayer at home. They're denying us resources here at home, like you mentioned, the billions of dollars in and millions of dollars in support for infrastructure at home, but they're voting to approve billions of dollars to support Israel. It's mind-boggling, and I think that's what's also should wake up most Americans. I mean, why do the Democrats and Republicans disagree just about on everything and fight about everything, but they both want to bend over backwards in their support for Israel? It's really strange. And you have Netanyahu, who's hated by even a lot of Israelis. I mean, Netanyahu is potentially facing criminal charges in Israel related to corruption and other things. He's a bad person. He's a genuinely bad human being. I mean, he's a corrupt, evil individual who now has tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of innocent lives on his hands. And both politicians on both sides of the aisle want to give him standing ovations in Congress. When you see the evil Israel is doing, and you see both Republicans and Democrats who disagree on everything, both united and competing on who can suck up to Israel more, that really makes you think and wonder, why does the Israeli lobby and the Israeli the AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, why do they have so much influence over our government? And why do these politicians do not prioritize serving Americans above serving this foreign entity? And the final thing I want to say about this is, like, there's this whole America First movement. But even when it comes to America First, it's like America First, except when it comes to Israel, it's actually Israel first. DeSantis, many politicians like him, they really do put Israel above the interests of the American people. And not only that, but at the expense of the American people. And it's time for Americans, even if you don't care about Palestinians, you don't care about people in the Middle East, you just care about America and this great land, then you should be extremely concerned of why these politicians are siphoning off American resources for Israel and doesn't benefit us. And we don't need it for our national security. I think that's one of the myths. Oh, we have to support Israel for our security. No, Israel has been the biggest liability for American security. Israel is the reason why so many people hate us. I mean, when you look at Israel, this didn't start October 7th. I mean, on October 6th, there was an article published that 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinian children so far in the last decade or so. Israel has been committing mass human rights violations since its inception. Okay. And that's why people hate us, because they see that Israel is basically a rogue terrorist state committing crimes against humanity with impunity. America's enabling it. So our support for Israel has actually made people hate us too. It's a liability. It's not an asset.
Right. And so when we're talking about these America First politicians, you're in Florida, you've got Ron DeSantis. I have an equally problematic dude, Greg Abbott, up here in Texas, who's also America First until it comes to Israel. It's do you feel like this natural disaster is a teachable moment for a lot of Floridians? When it comes to sending foreign aid out, not just to Israel, but just to anyone, and be will they put two and two together, do you think?
I hope so. And I think that's why it's so important. You're speaking out. We're speaking out. We have to raise awareness. Guys, America is struggling. We don't have the right infrastructure in place. And imagine if those billions, and actually, I saw some studies out there that look, the war of terror, I call it the war of terror, not the war on terror, but it's cost us at least $10 trillion, at least 10 trillion. That was a direct result of our support for Israel. Netanyahu lobbied for us to get involved in Iraq and Afghanistan. He promoted the lie about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So, I mean, support of Israel didn't just cost us the hundreds of billions of dollars that we've given them in direct aid. When you account for the war of terror, when you account for now DHS and Homeland Security and TSA and all these other mechanisms we had to put in place that came from the conflicts that have arisen out of our support for this terrorist state of Israel, you're talking about around, and you account for inflation, you account for interest, you're talking about potentially around $17 trillion that America has lost and American taxpayers have lost because of our support for Israel and getting involved in the war of terror and all of this. America needs that money. If you imagine, had we just kept those billions at home to have right infrastructure, we wouldn't be struggling as much right now after this hurricane. So I hope the hurricane's a wake-up call. I hope it's a reminder that we need to keep our money here at home. We need to take care of Americans first, and we need to stop sending billions of dollars overseas where, I wish it was being used for good things, but it's being used to kill children. So it's a win-win. Save children abroad and keep America running with healthcare, with proper infrastructure, proper access to resources, proper jobs here at home.
So my concern is that it just seems like by monitoring like the conversations happening on the political right, there is this sense that there's also a distrust of the government, right? Of government institutions, three-letter agencies, the FBI, CIA. There's a massive distrust of FEMA, and there's been talk going around that there's cops now guarding warehouses full of rotting food, that people were using private helicopters to rescue people, and government agencies kind of wanted to shut that down. I was just wondering what you've heard about that going in Florida or on the East Coast following the Hurricane Helene.
Right. I mean, the way the government's handled this disaster has been quite problematic. I mean, there's Hurricane Milton, by the way, didn't come out of nowhere. We had Hurricane Helene before. We knew exactly what was happening and what was about to happen. It wasn't far off from the projections. But unfortunately, you find these politicians, it's not a sort of, the problem didn't start this week or this month or this year, right? It's a whole history of where the tax dollars have been going over the last decades. And instead of it being invested in infrastructure at home, it's been unfortunately siphoned off, for places like Israel. And the problem with the American first is I think the people, the voters, and those that they vote, they're not even aligned. So you are starting to find more people starting to wake up and ask, well, why is billions of our dollars going to Israel? Why isn't that money kept here at home? And I think that's relatively new. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still taking the old talking points like Israel's our greatest ally, but then you sort of push how is it our ally? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But it's also when it comes to the right, and if you see the same people that are pushing the talking point, Israel's our greatest ally, and if we don't fight terrorists over there, we're gonna have to fight them over here. It's also wrapped up in a Reagan era conflation of like terrorism and communism too. It's like this idea that if you actually spend taxpayer money on Americans, that's like socialism, which is communism. And so that I think that's also wrapped up in this morass of like multi-generational propaganda about terrorists and about communism as well.
It's a very good point. But the reality is, it's like we don't even need as Americans handouts. Either one, keep the money in our pockets. I mean, according to sort of the data we're looking at, if the money that we spent either in direct aid to Israel or as a consequences of our support for Israel just simply stayed in our pockets, and you account for inflation and interest, every American could have an extra 200 grand to their name. Literally every individual, when you look at the amount of money that supporting Israel has cost us. So number one, just keep it with the people, not with the government. That's the first option. The second option is using those resources to provide services that people ultimately pay for. I mean, I pay, I don't know, $600 a month in my electric bill, but yet they don't have the infrastructure to keep the power going and resume it quickly when these hurricanes come. So we're not asking for handouts. We are paying for this. We're already paying for this infrastructure. We paid for the roads. We're paying for the sewage systems. These are things that you have to pay for. But unfortunately, they're absolutely substandard. So the money is there, it's accounted for, but it's being shipped off overseas instead of being used for what we've given it for.
So how long do you see this humanitarian crisis going on?
I imagine. Well, the only the Hurricane Milton crisis, because that's the other crazy thing, right? And I know we were discussing this earlier. People call what's happening in Gaza humanitarian crisis. It is not. It
No,
is
it's a
an
man-made
intentional,
famine, intentional.
It's a man-made famine. It's man-made disaster that we're actively enabling and supporting. But what we have in Florida is a humanitarian disaster. It is a natural disaster. But again, it's exasperated by our policies and by where we've invested our resources. So we're not expecting power here maybe till the end of the week. So we're going to be about a week and a half without power. I saw reports that saying some parts of Florida could take up to a month. God knows, but life's sort of been put on a quick standstill here at home. And again, it's outrageous for me. When yesterday I was sitting on my phone and I'm seeing Israel dropping bombs, and I'm just wondering to myself, man, I can't get a gallon of gas to keep the generator running, but Israel, with my tax dollars, has money to drop bombs on kids.
Well, they also get constant gas shipments as well.
That's true. And again, I think it's just a wake-up call for Americans. Really, my message to Americans, because I've been trying to approach, look, I'm a proud American. I'm American by choice. We immigrated to this country. We came from Syria because this country, frankly, does offer a greater level of freedom at home than a lot of other places. And that's something we cherish and we value. We value the Constitution. I think the Constitution is what's, keeping this country alive. And unfortunately, especially in the early years post 9/11, there wasn't that distrust of the three-letter agencies, right? So when the FBI wanted to make all Muslims look like they're bad, when they wanted to lock up thousands of immigrants who were here legally and came legally, with the INS and all of this, when the American Muslim community was being targeted, spied on, and entrapped, there was a lot of support amongst the conservatives for that, right? They believed the FBI, even though they were literally manufacturing terrorist plots in the U.S. This is undisputed. Author Trevor Aronson has done great research on this. They're literally manufacturing plots using literally mentally ill teenagers or people with mental health problems who couldn't harm a fly. FBI would literally spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to paint them as if they're some dangerous threat to society, arrest them, slap them with a 40, 50-year sentence, and be the heroes for saving the day, and then get billions and billions of dollars more in funding for their counterterrorism program. But, judges themselves have said, look, there's not enough terrorists to justify the FBI's budget. So they're opening they manufacture these plots. So in those years, the conservatives were trusting and supportive. I think post January 6th, a lot of them started waking up and saying, wait a minute, maybe there is government overreach. Well, the government is now spying on me, and they're saying that they're spying on them. And they're like, well, welcome to what it's been like living as an American Muslim for since 9/11 here in this country. So I think the distrust of the government is a good thing. Just unfortunately, people haven't been consistent with their distrust when it was the other, people who look a little different, maybe have a different beard or a hat or whatever. Oh, it's okay. Let the government spy on them. But then when it's coming back around and they feel like they're being spied on, now they're starting to wake up. So I think people need to be united. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's the crux of it. Americans, especially, let's be honest, white Americans are only going to be motivated to do something through self-interest if they feel like their own rights are being impeded on. And one of the things I try to do is essentially teach white supremacists that white supremacy is bad for them too, because it's going to start with the most marginalized groups first. And as authoritarianism comes in, it's going to work its way up the privilege ladder until everyone who dissents is just an enemy of the state.
Exactly. And that's what it's about. At the end of the day, it's a tool for the state to get more power, to control. And they don't care. Frankly, I don't think they don't care about even the average white, hardworking American, blue collar. They're the ones that suffer, and they've been brainwashed. This is the problem, the programming and the brainwashing, where people think those in authority, those who are in a position to influence billions of dollars that's frankly controlled by an elite few, that they actually care about the average American and the average person, and they don't. I think we as Americans have to be united in challenging our government, holding it accountable, not buying into this sort of divide and conquer approach that they've taken on us. The chickens come home to roost. The door swings both ways. The same tactics that are used against one minority group today will be used against everyone else tomorrow.
Yeah, to include the white working class.
Absolutely.
Like you can see during the civil rights movement, like union leaders were talking to activists within and leaders of the Black Panthers, and some people ended up getting assassinated. So yeah, that's always been a huge threat. But I don't know. I guess I'm kind of cynical that this will be a wake up call for people. Like I'm concerned they might draw the wrong conclusion from it, because I don't know. I just see that Ron DeSantis makes a popular move by turning down $11 billion of government funding for natural disaster infrastructure. And it doesn't seem like from the conservative population that he got a lot of blowback from it. Because there's this idea, it's like, no, we turned down federal funds. I don't know where that comes from, but it's definitely there in the background.
I mean, it's literally our money coming back to us that we've paid. If you instead of turning down the funds, maybe vote to reduce taxes for the average working person. That's one approach. But there's a lack of consistency, and I think what you're dealing with is decades and decades of programming and brainwashing. Look, the Israelis, and you have to connect it directly to what the Israelis are doing, because there is a Hasbro propaganda manual that have taught these talking points, that have put it in the framework of why it's okay for America to send billions of dollars overseas. We have to deconstruct that, and we have to start making these connections and start having these conversations. So I think every time there's a problem in this country, every time there's challenges that are faced, that there's a crisis, we have to connect it to why are we lacking resources here but sending resources there. And had those resources stayed at home, we wouldn't have the problems that we're facing right now. So it's an uphill battle. I definitely think it's an uphill battle, but we have to keep speaking out. And one of the other things that it's got me thinking about is, for a lot of us, man, losing power just for a week, it does come as a shock for a lot of us. Some of us, I mean, I could show you my neighbor's home here if you don't mind. I mean, I don't know if you see, but you see the damage. I don't know if you see that there was a whole cage structure in the back that just completely fallen over on the house. That's about $100,000 worth of damage. But we're still very privileged. You know what I'm saying? There's people that have had their entire homes destroyed, flooded, etc. And I think it gives us just a small glimpse of what other people are facing. Whatever damage we have, we can fix it. We know the power is going to come back out. But imagine the people in Gaza who've literally been forced out of their homes and don't know where to go and have no end in sight. We have to have a level of empathy. They have no end in sight. There's not I can go back home tomorrow. Their entire neighborhood, city's been demolished, and they're being told to go south, then north, then east, then west. And every time they're going somewhere, they're getting bombed, and they're literally being wiped out. They're losing everything. I mean, we go through a little inconvenience, and it's hard for us. And you just got to think about how still in our darkest times in this country, we're still so blessed. We're still so blessed. And yet the people in Gaza, literally, they're not going to have homes to return to, right? They're not waiting for the power to come back. They're just wondering if they're going to survive the night each and every day. And at the end of the day, we have to wake up as Americans, understand we are 100% responsible for what they're going through, because Israel could not do what they're doing if it wasn't for American weapons and political cover. We have to take responsibility. It's upon us. And now we have to start pushing ourselves in a way where we actually elect people that care about the Americans, care about human rights, and just haven't sold their soul to Israel. The one message I want my fellow Americans to understand, and I started by saying that, look, we immigrated to this country. We're Americans by choice, and we're proud to be Americans. We love this country. But out of our love for this country, I want my fellow Americans to wake up and understand that those at the highest levels of power in this country do not care about us as Americans. They care about their own pockets and their own political careers, and as a result of that, they're putting Israel and other foreign interests and the interests of the military-industrial complex above our own at our expense, and we need to change that.
All right. I couldn't agree with you more. And I just want to say one thing. We have our own natural disasters in Texas now. Every year, freeze happens and hundreds of people die because the power grid just shuts down and all the shops close. And, it only lasts for like 4 or 5 days, but there's actually like violence in the streets, people fighting
Crazy.
over food and stuff. So,
Crazy.
yeah, we're definitely very lucky over here. But, again, motivating Americans through self-interest. Hey, would you like to fix the power grid in Texas? Hey, would you like to storm-proof Florida a little bit better? Just start there. I mean, Even if you don't care about what's happening in Palestine, let's just start there, and hopefully we can keep educating people about, where our tax money should be going. Thank you so much, Hassan Shibly, founder and lead attorney of Muslim Legal out of Florida. Thanks for making the time.
Appreciate you. Keep up the great work, brother. Thank you so much. God bless.
Okay, so, well, I guess my good camera's not working. Well, the entire time I was watching that pre-recorded interview, I made the mistake of posting some educational content on a liberal post talking about voting for Harris. Obviously, Trump's not going to be great for America either, but oh my God, the amount of rage hate. So much oh, run for office or shut up and sit down, Greg. It was just saying hey, maybe genocide's not cool. It's basically don't remind me that my candidate's doing that, okay? Imperial war is brat, all right? Actually, brat summer's over. It's burning civilians alive. Fall. So I don't I did get one great comment that I'm going to share with the group. I am a gay woman from a Muslim country. Apparently, that is something we need to shout out for credibility when a bunch of white gay men try to be your thought police. They love Harris. In general speak, I have friends who don't, but generally they're rabid for Harris. Truth is, they don't give a shit about people like me. Y'all do. They will happily twerk to Kamala's genocide because they fear a made-up genocide of their rights in their heads over the actual one that's been happening for a year. And yeah, okay, so that's Brad. And I was just thinking about this, the mass spectacle and choreography that went into the DNC. It reminded me Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. You just sub out Ride of the Valkyries by Wagner with 369 or From the Window to the Wall by Lil Jon, and it's the same. It's the same kind of spectacle. So, all right, and you had Democrats, New York City coastal elites chanting USA, US. It's just what's happening, man? Anyways, we're gonna try to interview some third-party candidates over here, all of them. So just so you guys have options and alternatives. All right, here we go. Q&A. Does the THAAD come under the expertise of the Army, Navy, or Air Force? I think it's the Army. Most air defense is Army. Because, okay, so this THAAD is coming out of Fort Bliss, we think. Fort Bliss is an Army artillery base in Texas. It's actually one of the worst duty stations to have. There's literally nothing out there because it's just meant to shoot artillery. So, yeah, that base sucks. But I think they're coming from there. So I assume they would be Army. Wait, did the U.S. just give the IOF another $3 billion worth of weaponry? No, we did not. But we are deploying $1 billion worth of weaponry because that's what the THAAD air defense system is, because it's the most complicated technology we have, to Israel. So that's the difference. And I don't think okay, so this ever-increasing so we didn't actually give them the weaponry. So this ever-increasing killing of Earth is through manufactured weaponized weather brought about by a very small section of mankind without a hint of conscience. Oh boy. Okay. Well, this is are we going to blame unchecked finance capitalism for what's actually happening in the oceans? The fact that we had 2 hurricanes in a row that were unprecedented, almost unprecedented damage. And that fact that fossil fuel companies were putting out position papers where ExxonMobil and British Petroleum studies from the 80s said, yeah, we knew this was going to happen. Are we? But I don't think you're realizing that capitalism is the best allocation of capital and, the distribution of wealth. And they have a fiduciary responsibility to increase profits every quarter for the shareholders. Okay. That's more important than the environment. All right. So get out of here, Quinn, with your crazy Marxist logic. All right. That doesn't make any sense. We definitely shouldn't blame it. The top 0.1% of, the overseas controllers of globalized financialized capital. Like, no, we can't do that here. That makes us feel uncomfortable, and we need to vote for like Democrats or Republicans. Okay, we don't even have any money. Oh, I wonder why. Is that because most of the Earth's wealth has been like monopolized by a few hundred people? Okay, we don't have any money. It's all debt funded to reduce spending on foreign deployments and bases, balance the terror budget, audit the Fed. I'm not sure about budget's ever gonna get balanced. I think like going for insolvency as a nation is the only way it's getting solved. So is it true that the two states hit by hurricanes are is it true that the two states hit by the hurricanes are the heartbeat of the war machine? Now Florida was like what? Florida and Georgia. Okay, there's a lot of military assets in Georgia. That's where I went through basic training at Fort Benning. You have 2 Ranger battalions out there. You've got a ton of stuff, but the military bases are placed strategically to protect themselves from natural disasters and storms. Like, so there is a volcano in Seattle, or sorry, in Washington State called Mount Denali. I think Mount St. Helens in Washington too, but it's technically a live volcano, and if it ever erupts, the base is positioned in a certain Joint Base. Lewis McChord is put in a perfect position to escape the lava flows. So everything else would get destroyed, but the military base would still exist. So no, military assets are generally not going to be hit. Although there was a base in Florida, but I think the damage was really negligible. So, mind you, their wealth was built originally on plunder too. Yes, plunder for sure. And when it comes to the aristocracy and the establishment of generational wealth, it also came from being feudal landlords. Hey. So, but luckily during the Industrial Revolution, like a lot of the feudal landlords, the families, the landlord families, the aristocracy, lost a lot of their generational wealth, and it was replaced by industrialists and colonialists. So, yeah, but that's a whole different thing. We had a national budget surplus for a short time in the 90s under Slick Willie government. Oh, yeah. Bill Clinton was the last time we had a balanced budget, huh? Oh, God. I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Joint Lewis. I guess I've just blocked out like most of my military experience. That is Mount Rainier. I've hiked Mount Rainier. Yeah, I guess I've just totally blocked it out. So, also Mount St. Helens is there too. But it is Rainier. Sorry, guys. You're right. All right, what else we got? Yes, glad to hear you'll be looking into interviewing all third-party candidates. I will, because I want to do adversarial interviews, so you can have talking points for when you're like, it's a vote for Trump. You're voting against our rights and our freedoms by voting third party. So I'm going to do adversarial interviews with them, like good faith adversarial interviews. So ask the talking point got you questions, so you can see how they respond and you can formulate your own rhetorical arguments against that. So that's kind of my concept for interviewing third-party candidates. So, okay. Yale University was funded by Elijah Yale, the governor of Chennai, Port City in South India, robbed the state dry and created Yale. Okay. Yeah. White supremacy and imperialism and colonialism are baked into the curriculums of these Ivy League institutions, and it hasn't changed. Actually, Edward Said wrote extensively about this in his formidable and foundational text, Colonialism. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. What do you know about how the ground invasion in Lebanon is going? It's not. They're just staying in their buffer zones, which only like penetrate a few hundred meters in, maybe a kilometer in some places, but they're not going for a ground invasion. What they said in was not a defeat Hezbollah army or conquer ground army. So I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to stall out and they're not going to accomplish anything, but because their operational objectives are so vague, they're going to declare victory. So, do I think there'll be a ceasefire there soon? Well, I can tell you what, in Lebanon, not in Gaza, in Lebanon, I don't know if they can maintain credibility politically and do a ceasefire without Hamas doing a ceasefire either. So, Hajar. Oh, hey, they're planting flags 300 meters from the border. Yeah, so mostly not even a kilometer in most places, though. Don't see any open source intel on like what to believe that they've conquered any towns or anything, guys. So they're shooting at UN peacekeepers. Yes, they are. We probably will talk about that next time. All right, y'all, we are out of time. Sorry for the clunky episode at the beginning. We had some technical issues, and Edward Said, wrote Orientalism. This is the book that you meant. It is, and everybody should read that book. All right, y'all. We will see you next time. It might be Wednesday because I'm traveling to Santa Barbara to actually record an interview with Butch Ware. So we're gonna try and figure that out. So we'll keep you updated on when the next show is happening. It's definitely this week, though. All right, guys. We will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and try not to let the horrendous state of planet Earth get you down. Cheers.